The woman who sparked international outrage when she took a baby wombat from its mother is finally admitting she goofed big time.
What I did was an incredible mistake, and there hasn't been a moment I haven't regretted it.
Sam Jones, who comes from Montana, has reportedly left Australia in the face of the firestorm. The controversial video shows the baby wombat, or Joey as it's known down under, crying out in apparent distress.
I caught a baby wombat. Mama's right there, and she is pissed.
Jones returns the baby to the side of the road. That is a protected species down under, and Australians are expressing outrage.
This is sickening behaviour. It's really distressing to look at that video.
The Prime Minister of Australia even joined in the denunciation. But in a new video statement which she addressed to the nation, Sam Jones says the government is being hypocritical because it allows wombats to be culled to help control their population.
The same government that is calling for my head is the one that spends millions of your tax dollars to mass slaughter native Australian animals.
Hey guys, it's me here, Comrade Lavender here, and today I'm back with another anti-capitalism true crime deep dive YouTube video topic. Today I want to do the topic of the hypocrisy of the Australian government when it comes to the influencer, the outrage over the baby wombat snatching incident that happened in Australia. So before we get started, I have a disclaimer. Before I get into the video, yes, the influencer who stole the baby wombat was 100% in the wrong here. There's no doubt about it. This video is to call out the hypocrisy of the Australian government in particular about this whole incident that happened in Australia with the wombat. But before we get started, all my YouTube videos that are related to this topic right now will be on the screen right now if it's related to this video. My other YouTube videos, if you'd like to check them out. So let's get started in this YouTube video topic. Sam Jones, an American influencer hunter, has left Australia after being involved in a disturbing incident where she snatched a baby wombat from her distressed mother and shared the footage online where she was acting like she was a Steve Irwin wannabe and doing it for clout. Although the animal was eventually returned to its mother soon after the incident, the act was widely condemned by animal protection advocates, the public, and the Australian government, highlighting the ongoing issues of individuals exploited non-human animals for social media content. This incident occurred during a visit to Australia, where Jones, who also goes by the name Samantha Straybell and describes herself as an outdoor enthusiast and hunter, uploaded a video showing her forcibly taking the baby wombat from its mother. The footage sparked outrage internationally among animal advocates and conservationists who pointed out the obvious distress she caused the mother and her baby. Wombats are marsupials native to Australia, and their welfare is protected under strict laws to preserve their natural habitats and ensure humane treatment. The Wombat Protection Society said it was shocked to see the mishandling of a wombat Joey in an apparent scratch for social media likes and clout. Suzanne Mildrobe, head of campaigns at World Animal Protection Australia, told the BBC Newsday that the posting of such a video on TikTok for cheap content was unacceptable and that the baby must have seemed like a giant predator was picking it up and taking it away from its mother. After an online petition demanded Jones be deported from Australia gathered more than 30,000 signatures, the influencer's departure from Australia of her own accord, who has been confirmed, activists urged social media platforms to take responsibility by removing content that promotes or glorifies harm to animals and wildlife, and penalizing users who engage in such behavior. As the incident was widely criticized not just by vegans, but by many people who consider themselves animal lovers, it has exposed the speciesist hypocrisy of people who find it apparent when someone takes a baby wombat from its mother but do not care, for example, if the dairy industry, if a farmer or farm workers takes away a baby cow from its mother so they can steal her milk. and will continue consuming dairy products even though over 70% of the world is lactose intolerant. Cruelty is the new norm in today's livestock industry, where farm animals are treated like mere money-making capitalism commodities instead of thinking, living, feeling creatures. It is common for male dairy calves to be taken away from their mothers immediately after birth and deprived of the vital nutrients and comfort only their mothers can provide. And citizens are appalled when they find out the inhumane conditions and intolerable suffering animals are subjected to at livestock markets and stockyards and on farms. They are shocked to learn that farm animals are excluded from the Federal Animal Welfare Act and from many states' anti-cruelty laws. As a result, huge numbers of male calves are unalived after birth. In 2015, 95,000 male calves were shot on farm. This is a standard practice whether we're talking about an organic farm, free range, or intensive farming. If the calf were allowed to live, he would consume his mother's breast milk, but farmers need it to sell to human consumption. If they are to make a profit from the animals, male calves are separated at birth from their mothers and often sold as veal in the meat industry and put on low iron diets that promote anemia and make it so they are unable to walk.
Day one, my job was to, there's an area where there was sort of 3 or 4 channels, a few hundred meters long, V-shape, half filled with water, and with all these cages all in them, each containing a sort of metre and a half croc. And my job was I had an offsider, he had a big battery like in a bag on his back, and a big sort of cattle prod kind of thing wrapped in a big PVC pipe with 2 prongs at the end. So his job was to electrocute the croc, my job was to pull the cage out of the channel, and there was a square opening at one end, at the end closest to me, where the cattle prod would go into the cage. So job was to flip it around. If the croc was being difficult, I had to try and get him down to the end with the opening, and once I got him there, the offsider would zap him for about 10 seconds, stun it, and then I'd have to open the cage door and tape the mouth and eyes shut either, and I didn't really want to come back home just yet. So I stuck it out, disassociated, but also pushed it kind of deep down to motivate me in a way, I guess, to at least get my degree and start doing some work in the conservation field. Yeah, that was definitely the catalyst I needed. It's just shitty that it was in, killing an animal that I love for, some designer brand handbags and stuff. Huge crocs that have territories of hundreds of kilometres in rivers or the coastline were then confined to, a small backyard pool size pond. And yeah, that was the part that would, every day we'd have to feed them whole chickens, and would get a bit of a lump in my throat doing it and sort of seeing the state of them, and felt like their spirit was crushed or defeated in a way, like, just seeing these animals reduced to, pretty much, they were breeder males for the rest of the facility population. I guess currently the mentality to conserve crocodiles or apex predators in general is to put a price tag on them, and I guess that's resulted in the leather trade now for designer products. It would be nice for people to just want to protect crocodiles, just to protect them.
Australian government, just like the government of the United States, spends upon millions of taxpayer dollars to unalive native wildlife. They also support and allow industries and companies to engage in exploiting animals for capitalism profits and putting profits over animal lives on a daily basis. Saltwater crocodiles are a native Australian animal that have lived on Australian land for over 100 million years. They play an important role in their ecosystem, maintaining the biodiversity and productivity of wetlands. Today, these ancient reptiles are being factory farmed and slaughtered to satisfy the desires of a lucrative fashion industry, as well as the leather trade industry. These crocodile skins are used for handbags and accessories that are sold for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars by global fashion houses around the world and sold to rich people. There are 13 known commercial crocodile farms in Australia. 5 are known to be owned and controlled by luxury fashion houses such as Hermes, and several others by Louis Vuitton. While the crocodile skin industry claims to exist for the sake of wildlife conservation, this is little more than a lie and a greenwashing tactic used to retain the industry's social license in order to continue profiting from the exploitation of these prehistoric animals. After World War II, powerful rifles that were capable of unaliving crocodiles, something earlier ammunition was unable to do, they became readily available. Furthermore, political unrest in Africa halted their regular supply of crocodile skins. Increasingly, the international demand in combination, these factors presented a market for Australia to begin unaliving crocodiles and selling their skins for profit internationally. In the 1950s and 1960s, unaliving crocodiles for their skins became so intensified that the species was driven to near extinction. In the 1970s, crocodiles were afforded a selection of protections in order to conserve the just 3,000 wild crocodiles remaining in the wild in the Northern Territory, who were facing a very real risk of full-on extinction. Since the ceasing of hunting crocodiles in the wild, their populations have increased to over 100,000, while the crocodile industry's main revenue stream is from the production of crocodilian skins for the fashion industry. Crocodile farming also generates some revenue from the meat and tourism trade. By 2002, it was estimated that there were over 68,000 crocodiles on 13 farms, almost all of which are intensive factory farming production systems, with some maintaining a tourism element to increase overall profits in the Australian tourism industry. Today, crocodiles have been granted so-called full protection in the Northern Territory, Western Australia, and Queensland. This means crocodiles cannot be taken, interfered with, or trapped or shot without holding a permit or a license. Additionally, a person may not possess, sell living or unalived crocodiles or their body parts without a permit or license to appear as if efforts are made to conserve their species as a whole. This full protection has done very little to protect crocodiles as individuals. On the contrary, past protections have now been rolled back and removed following a proposal to farm the species for slaughter. Saltwater crocodiles were recategorized from Annex 1 of the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna CITES to Appendix 2. This means that crocodiles had parts of their protections revoked and removed so they could be profited from under the guise of wildlife conservation. Australia accounts for 60% in the global trade of crocodilian skins, 2/3 of which comes from the Northern Territory, the largest producer and dominant supplier of crocodile skins worldwide. Despite industry and government insistence of high animal welfare standards and wildlife conservation, the commercial crocodile factory farming industry is rooted in deprivation and confinement. The reality is crocodiles are living miserably in tiny barren pens and wire cages on Australian farms. And under current codes of practice, it is not even required they be afforded the length of their own body or space to live in. This allows fashion companies to boost high welfare standards when their factory farming facilities marginally exceed the extreme poor government requirements and make no meaningful difference to the crocodile suffering on farms. Conserving wildlife species is important, however, the integrity of individual animals' lives is more important, and factory farming is not an appropriate solution. With more crocodiles living in confinement in factory farms than in their natural wildlife habitat in Australia, it is pretty clear that the crocodile farming industry is not for the good of animals at all, and it's not even about wildlife conservation.
Farmers consider them a pest, kangaroos are a protected species. It's an offence to kill them without a licence. Each year, state departments calculate a quota of kangaroos to be shot by the commercial industry. But that quota doesn't account for all the kangaroos killed in the state. Farmers can also apply for the permits to cull kangaroos on their own land, when they're deemed a pest.
I can't understand how it is that our snakes are protected. You're not allowed to shoot a snake, but you can go out and knock over 2,000 kangaroos. You can do it as a social activity with all your mates on the back of trucks.
Kangaroos are brutally hunted and killed in Australia in a poorly regulated industry on their native land for the sake of the fashion industry. Kangaroo skin has been used for many years by the fashion industry, but particularly in the creation of sports shoes. As years go by, more fashion designers are using kangaroo skin to produce their leather products, claiming that it is a more ethical and sustainable material. However, these claims have been disputed and are far from truthful. Kangaroos are intuitive breeders and do not birth young in drought conditions to ensure there is enough food and grass and water for existing kangaroos. In an intense drought, kangaroos lose their pregnancies and miscarry, and kangaroo numbers are known to decline by up to 65%. Between 2019 and 2020, drought caused a population decline of 4 million kangaroos, 25% in New South Wales. The average kangaroo doe's fertile lifespan is about 8 years, and her first likely to be successful joey is often weaned when she is around only 4 years old. With 73% of juvenile mortality, a kangaroo doe will birth 2 to 3 surviving kangaroos in her whole lifetime, if even that. In 2018, almost 8,000 car collisions claims were made to the AAMI insurance regarding kangaroos. It is common to see dead kangaroos that have been hit by cars on the side of country roads. During bushfire season, many kangaroos also perished too. In the 2019 through 2020 bushfires, a staggering 5 million kangaroos and joey wallabies burned and passed away. The government estimates there are about 34 million kangaroos across Australia, a decline of 23% between 2019 and 2020. Kangaroos are threatened by habitat loss due to animal agriculture and farming, and factory farming, which requires large amounts of land to be deforested and cleared, grazed on by non-native animals. Kangaroos have lived in the same land in Australia for over 20 million years, far longer than any white colonizer in the country. The country Australia has only existed under British colonisation for a few hundred years, and since that colonisation in New South Wales, kangaroo populations have declined by as much as about 90%. Since 2000, 42% of identified kangaroo populations in parts of tropical Queensland have undergone an overall decline in abundance, according to the CSIRO, yet the Australian government and the animal agricultural industry and factory farming treats them as pests and a plague, offering licenses to unalive and cull them. Across their native grasslands, 31.5 million kangaroos have been brutally unalived over the last decade. This is the largest commercial slaughter of land-dwelling wildlife in the world. Each year, state governments set quotas about how many kangaroos can be culled and killed and claim that quotas are sustainable. However, scientists dispute this claim based on the false claims that kangaroos breed out of control, damage the environment, and become a plague on farmers' land. These unalivings and cullings take place across the country, bringing in up to 90 million Australian dollars annually. Kangaroos are shot and unalived at night in rural locations, and monitoring or policing is non-existent. A code of practice outlines how kangaroos should be shot, but the code is not enforced, and there is no way of telling if the code has been breached or actually followed. Conservative estimates suggest that up to 94,000 kangaroos are not killed and processed as it is outlined in the code. Other reports state that up to 40% are neck shot, causing immense pain and trauma rather than an instant death. Examination of decapitated heads removed after killing often show no bullet wounds, suggesting death by a secondary trauma. Even an ex-kangaroo shooter supported these findings, stating that the industry is cruel, inhumane, and 100% unchecked. A Shot in the Dark, a report on the kangaroo harvesting prepared by a wildlife ecologist, found that every year, some 440,000 dependent young kangaroos are either clubbed to death or left to starve after their mothers are killed. The Australian government recommends that joeys are killed by blunt force trauma. The code advises how to bludgeon a joey to death.
They all alone in this world, you wanna wreck them. So how could you do it, Sarah? Does it make you feel bigger when you pulled the trigger? Sarah Palin, you're worse than Michael Vick. You really make me sick. Ain't got no love for a canine killer. And my heart goes out to all the cute wolves that we now without. Hunting them down in a low-flying plane. They die a slow death as they cry in pain. You offered $150 for the leg of a wolf. Is that the price of life? Is that what it's worth?
We've seen wolf tracks going through the herd several times.
Somebody starts taking your livelihood away from you, you're going to fight to keep it.
Native dingoes and other native wild animals unalived by the wool sheep industry and the Australian government and the meat industry, causing ecosystem disruption. Across the wool-producing country, Australia, native dingoes are trapped, poisoned, and shot and killed by the wool industry. The now extinct Tasmanian tiger was similarly prosecuted by farmers claiming the false rumor that they were killing their sheep. And such stories are mirrored in other wool-producing countries and animal agricultural industries, with native wolves in the United States and foxes in the United Kingdom and mountain lions in the United States unalived by those profiting from sheep rearing and animal agriculture. In Australia, dingoes are considered a native animal species and have lived on the land for as long as 18,000 years. The species is culturally significant to Indigenous Aboriginal Australian people in Australia, as more natural dingo habitat has been destroyed, largely due to animal agriculture and cattle and sheep farming, and unalived by those profiting from environmental harm. Their pack structures have been negatively impacted. As a result, more dingoes have preyed on lambs. In response, the sheep industry traps, shoots, and poisons dingoes in order to protect profits generated when sheep are shorn and ultimately slaughtered by the meat industry itself. The Tasmanian tiger was driven to extinction for the same reasons native dingoes are dying today. The wool industry killed them following claims that they were killing sheep when they weren't. Dingoes aren't unaliving most lambs anyway. The sheep farming industry is. Many lambs are unalived in the wool and meat industry, as many as 10 million before they reach weaning age each year. However, science studies, including those funded by the sheep industry itself, have shown that as little as 0.1% to 8% of lamb deaths are actually caused by any kind of carnivore or predation. Not only is killing dingoes cruel and harmful to the ecosystem, it's misguided. Most young lambs in the wool industry who are unalived before their pre-planned slaughter date due to a mix of profit capitalism-driven selective breeding practices and cold, harsh conditions in a country where shade and shelter for farmed animals and livestock is not mandatory. Other native animals, including lynx, grizzly bears, mountain lions, native bighorn sheep, tortoises, koalas,